This might be the most controversial video I ever make. It shouldn't be, but it might be. But here goes. Last week, I put out a video about something called luxury poverty, about the system that we're currently living in where necessities like housing, transportation, education, and healthcare are prohibitively expensive, while luxury products like electronics and clothes and furniture and other consumer goods have become proportionately much cheaper over time. And in the making of that video, I started thinking a lot about how we truly got into this mess. This mess where we have a housing crisis and unemployment rates are soaring and people are being forced to live with their parents or roommates well into adulthood, but everyone still has access to iPhones, Gucci bags, and $9 coffees. And more specifically, why we're all just going along with it. It's no secret that there is a massive issue with wealth disparity in the world right now, and it's only been getting worse every year. In the US specifically, the top 1% of the population currently holds about 35% of the nation's wealth, while the bottom 50% holds less than 4% collectively. To put some real numbers behind these stats, the top 0.1% of the population, which is comprised of just 134,000 households, controls a collective $22 trillion. That breaks down to an average net worth of $164 million per household. But the bottom 50% of Americans, which is comprised of 67 million households, collectively controls only $9.9 trillion, or an average of $147,000 per household. But why is this a problem? Well, all economies run on the basis of a capped amount of money being in circulation. And all economies operate based on money circulating and constantly changing hands. That's how you and I and everyone else gets paid at the end of the day. When a poor person gets money, it's almost immediately put back into circulation as they use it to pay bills and cover rent or buy groceries. When a middle-class person gets money, they may hang on to it for a few months or maybe even a few years if they aren't living paycheck to paycheck, but ultimately it will still be spent too. Possibly on daily essentials or maybe on something a little bougier like a vacation or a home renovation or paying for their kids' college or university, but it will still ultimately be spent and put back into circulation. But when a wealthy person gets money, someone like a multi-millionaire or billionaire who already has more than enough to pay for everything and anything they could possibly need or want, that money doesn't get spent. It just gets added to an ever-growing pile. It gets hoarded. Now, in just a minute, we're going to do a deeper dive into all of this and talk about how it affects you directly, because it absolutely affects you. But before we get too deep into the woods about the things that are outside of our control, let's talk about the things that we can control. The one thing that we all have in common is a desire for a happy life, one with good health and financial stability and fulfilling work. And the way that you navigate your career is the single biggest determining factor as to whether or not you achieve this. For years, I worked in unfulfilling jobs that paid me less than I felt my skills were worth and offered little to no opportunity for growth. Over and over again, I would tell myself that I was going to make a change, but then months would go by and I'd done nothing. But once I finally did take action, which in my case was starting a business, my entire life started to change for the better and I never looked back. If you're currently feeling stuck in your job, like you're not happy with where you're at, but you also don't really know what to do next, I can't recommend career coaching enough. Today's sponsor, Strawberry.me, can match you with a certified career coach who can help you gain clarity on your next move and build an actionable plan to make it a reality, all while keeping you accountable along the way. Strawberry.me is convenient and affordable, and it may just be the best investment you ever make in yourself. Head over to strawberry.me/according to Nicole or click the link below to get started with a free $50 credit towards your coaching today. So obviously, we can all name some billionaires. People like Elon, Zuck, Bezos, Mark Cuban, Donald Trump, even Taylor Swift. But these are just the popular ones. In the US alone, there are currently 1,135 billionaires and a little over 3,000 in the world overall. Most of them are people that you and I have never even heard of. Some are like random businessmen or heirs to large corporations, but what they all have in common is that they have more money than they could ever spend in 100 lifetimes. Now, inevitably, anytime this is brought up, there are people who rush to their defense, which is really weird and gross, to be honest, because I can assure you that they don't care about you at all. But defending billionaires really is just an indication that you probably don't understand how much $1 billion really is, and more pressingly, that you don't understand how this affects you. A billion is 1,000 millions, but 1 billion isn't even scratching the surface. Jeff Bezos, for example, is currently worth $240 billion. Elon Musk is worth $430 billion. That's 430,000 millions, to be clear. That's more money than he, his many kids, his eventual grandkids, and even his grandkids' grandkids could ever spend, even living the most elaborate lifestyles possible. Also, Bezos doesn't even have kids, so God knows what he's planning to do with it all. Chances are very likely that some of these guys will end up becoming trillionaires in the next few years. And yes, many billionaires have made their fortunes from inventing cool shit that we all use and love. And yes, they deserve to be rich as a result. No one is really arguing otherwise, but there is a big difference between being rich and hoarding wealth. And what billionaires are doing is hoarding wealth. It's important to understand that when a small pool of people hoard a large portion of a country's wealth, it leaves less money in circulation for the rest of the population to have access to and to live on. Essentially, a few people run off with the entire pie and then leave everyone else fighting over crumbs. And one of the oldest tricks in the book is to point the finger at everyone else. If they can convince us that the reason we're struggling is because of immigrants taking our jobs, or people who rely on food stamps, or the Democrats, or the Republicans, or whatever other group, we'll be too busy fighting with each other to realize what's really happening.
We can't get work nowhere. They took our jobs. They took your jobs. They took your jobs too.
I've always visualized it like this. Let's say I'm super wealthy, and just because I can, I decide to go to every grocery store in my city and buy up every single last piece of food. Technically speaking, I'm allowed to do this. It's not illegal, I have the money, and even if I could never reasonably come close to eating all that food, that's my right because I paid for it. If I want to watch it all rot for shits and giggles, I can. But the question is this ethical? Should it be legal? Should I be allowed to hoard all, or at least the vast majority of a resource that people need to survive? If you think that it should be illegal for me to buy all the food in the city and just let it rot while everyone else starves simply because I can, then congratulations, you now see why billionaires shouldn't exist. If you think that it would be just for someone to force me to share that food with everyone else, regardless of the fact that I paid for it, then congratulations, you believe in socialism. It's not such a big scary word after all, is it? And if you think that I should be allowed to hoard food for fun and force everyone else to starve, get help. So billionaires are hoarding wealth, but why don't most people care? Why don't most people take issue with it? Well, as I said, the mainstream media, which coincidentally is often owned and controlled by these very billionaires, manipulates us to point the blame elsewhere. And this certainly plays a role. But it goes much deeper. Author John Steinbeck was quoted as saying, "Socialism never took root in America because the poor see themselves not as an exploited proletariat, but as temporarily embarrassed millionaires." And I think this is bang on. Capitalism has always pushed the narrative that anyone can make it if they work hard enough. And with this, there's this pervasive belief amongst poor people that they aren't really poor. They're just down on their luck right now, but soon it's going to change. If you work hard enough and do all the right things, then you too can be rich like Elon or Zuck one day. Except that that logic is fundamentally flawed in many ways. The first being that if everyone was rich, then no one would be rich. And also, with the top 1% of the population hoarding as much money as they are, there physically isn't enough money left in circulation for everyone else to be rich. And then of course, even if you managed to become rich, even if you had a few $1,000,000 in the bank, you're still never going to be anything close to a billionaire. But let's circle back to the initial question of how we got here and why we're complacent to all of this, because I have a theory. I think it relates a lot to what Steinbeck said. Poor people often don't recognize or acknowledge or even really know that they're poor because they don't have to live like they are. Thanks to credit cards, buy now, pay later services, payday loans, and all sorts of other consumer debts, people are able to have access to whatever they want, even if they can't afford it. And when you have the newest iPhone and you wear expensive designer clothes and you order DoorDash for dinner every night and you can basically just do whatever you want all the time, you don't feel poor and you don't look poor. And with consumer debt so normalized, there are now legitimately millions of people out there with 5 or even 6 figures of consumer debt who genuinely don't even know they're poor. Look no further than the people who appear on Caleb Hammer's channel. Personally, I'm not really a fan of what his content has become, but the guests are a perfect example of what I'm talking about. You have people in their 30s or 40s or even their 50s with $0 in retirement and like $50,000 of credit card debt who, when asked, rate their financial situation as not that bad. They don't feel it and they're not bothered by it because they can still buy the things they want. To be clear, having no money in retirement or having thousands of dollars in credit card debt is very, very bad. It's a huge deal. And the older you are, the more serious it is. But my theory is that without access to debt, people would be forced to come to terms with the reality of their situation. If they felt the FOMO of not being able to buy the things they want, if they genuinely had no way to pay to go out to eat, or no way to afford a car or a phone or a computer or a smartwatch, or no way to buy clothes or whatever else, they would feel the true weight of being poor, and they would be livid. And being that the vast majority of the population is much closer to poverty than they will ever be to billionaire status, change would be demanded by any means necessary.
Those puny little ants outnumber us 100 to 1. And if they ever figure that out, there goes our way of life.
There would undoubtedly be a revolution, but there hasn't been because we have Visas and MasterCards and Klarna and Affirm and all these other ways of buying things with money that we don't have. And all of this has led me to wonder, what's the end game? The average American has over $90,000 in debt. Typically, when you die in debt, creditors get first dibs on your assets and estate. But with home ownership becoming increasingly out of reach, many people over the next several decades will probably die with large debts and no assets to speak of. So then what happens? What happens when millions of people die with large debts that banks can't collect on? Ask anyone who lived through the 1930s. The banks will collapse and will be thrusted into another Great Depression. Now, none of this is to say that capitalism doesn't have its merits. It definitely does. And none of this is to say that innovative people who start big successful companies and change the world don't deserve to get rich as a result. They do. But there are reasonable and unreasonable levels of wealth. And I think one of the most important and most commonly overlooked parts of this discussion is the fact that no one becomes a billionaire from their own hard work. It's very possible for a single person to build a business that goes on to generate, let's say, a few $1,000,000 a year. It's definitely not easy or common, but it does happen. But there is not a single billionaire in existence who has made all their money on their own. Like, Jeff Bezos may have founded Amazon with financial help from his parents, but okay, fine. But Jeff Bezos did not turn Amazon into a multi-billion-dollar company on his own. Elon Musk may have founded Tesla. Actually, that's debatable too, but fine. But he did not turn it into a multi-billion-dollar company on his own. In order for Amazon to generate their $500 billion of revenue each year, they rely on the blood, sweat, and tears and the labor of hundreds of thousands of employees who do everything from picking and packing orders to answering customer service emails to driving delivery trucks. In order for Tesla or Apple or Google or any of these giant companies to rake in billions of dollars every year, they rely on hundreds of thousands of other people. And in no way am I suggesting that those people should earn as much as the founders or the CEOs. That would be crazy. But I am suggesting that they should have generous salaries, full health and dental care, 401k matches, and PTO. I am suggesting that if you're worth $300 billion and any of the people who work for you, all the way down to the janitor who scrubs the toilets, can't pay their rent or doesn't have health insurance or can't take paid leave when they have a baby, you are a piece of shit. And that's precisely where this becomes a problem. The reason these people have such astronomical levels of wealth is specifically because they exploit their frontline employees and because they use loopholes to avoid paying income taxes. If they don't want to provide their employees with health insurance, that's fine. The government can. But the government needs them to pay their fair share of taxes in order to fund these programs. And they don't. Now, if you yourself are doing pretty well financially right now, you may be watching this video thinking that none of this affects you, so why should you even care? Well, if empathy for others isn't reason enough, here's some food for thought. Billionaires shape the economy that you operate within. They lobby for tax breaks and subsidies for themselves at the cost of raising your taxes, when it should be the other way around. By hoarding obscene quantities of assets like stocks and real estate, they lower the available supply and inflate prices, meaning that these things become more expensive for you to acquire. When money is scarce and the population is struggling, fewer businesses can afford to open, and fewer people can afford to patronize the businesses that are open, meaning that they won't be open for long, and your community will have fewer amenities available over time. Because billionaires avoid paying taxes, The public services that we all rely on, like police, firefighters, EMS, public schools, infrastructure, healthcare, all of these things get underfunded. This, combined with their lobbying efforts, also leads to the deregulation of important systems that make sure our air is clean to breathe and our water is safe to drink. Billionaires control everything you see, hear, and do. They control the media outlets and the politicians in an effort to keep you uninformed, or rather misinformed, about what's happening in the world around you, so that they can skew the narrative to their own benefit. And most importantly, even if you yourself are wealthy, wealth inequality destabilizes society. It leads to higher crime rates and political and social unrest, and it makes life more stressful and less safe for everyone, including you. You might have money, but you don't have billionaire money, so you're not in their club. Your interests are not aligned with theirs, and you're still being screwed. You are still the dummy, and they are still the ones pulling the strings. So just to quickly recap here. Billionaires rely on the labor of hundreds of thousands of underpaid workers to run their companies and make them unfathomably rich. They hoard more wealth than they could ever spend in 100 lifetimes, leaving less money in circulation for the rest of the population, causing the majority of people to barely scrape by. And then they use loopholes to avoid paying their fair share of taxes that could otherwise be redistributed to the working class in the form of things like healthcare, subsidized education, affordable housing, or universal basic income. Then they tell the public that the reason they're poor is actually because of Mexicans or Muslims or people on welfare in order to evade responsibility for the mess they've made, and we the people continue to live in ignorant bliss, unfazed as long as we can still buy a burrito with 4 monthly installments and flex our financed car on Instagram. Many millennials and Gen Zs will never be able to retire, and Gen Alpha will most likely endure a massive economic depression right as they enter middle age. But hey, at least we have 2-day Prime shipping. Now, I don't want this video to be all doom and gloom, but these conversations are so important because progress can never be made without first identifying the true enemy. And contrary to what we're all being told, it's not each other. It never has been. This has never been about right versus left, or Christian versus Muslim, or gay versus straight, or black versus white, or anything else. It always has been, and it always will be, about rich versus poor. And not rich like your boomer parents with a well-funded 401k and a vacation home. Not rich like your doctor or your dentist who make a few $100K a year. Rich like the people who have enough wealth to single-handedly manipulate the economy. Rich like the people who buy up entire neighborhoods of single-family homes and turn them into rentals. Rich like the people who pay Congress to let them do whatever they want, and quite literally buy the government so they can pass laws to suit their personal best interests at the expense of everyone else. So please, don't let the fact that you can buy dinner on credit distract you from the fact that you shouldn't have to. Anyways, that is all I've got for you guys in this one. I am very much looking forward to reading your comments. I'm sure they are going to be completely civilized and not hyperbolic or ridiculous or bootlicking in nature at all. Can't wait, looking forward to it. If you like the video, subscribe for more. You can follow me on Instagram at according_to_Nicole. Don't forget to check out strawberry.me. The link will be in the description box down below, or you can scan this QR code. Other than that, thank you guys so much as always for watching. Take care, and I'll see you next time.